Welcome csc103 class to Networking Part 1. This is a quick little PowerPoint. I'll try to make it as quick and painless as possible. There's only about a dozen slides here, so let's get started. This is just a little bit of overview. What is a network? What types of networks are there? What hardware software is needed? And then we'll talk a little bit about a home network, just the basics. And then in Part 2, we'll dig in a little bit more. And in Part 1, we'll talk about the types of networks: WAN, LAN, MAN, HAN, and PAN. They're separated by distance. And client-server, peer-to-peer, defined by level of administration. And also a little bit about file sharing for Mac and Windows, and broadband connection options for the internet. Networks are defined by distance and level administration. We'll talk about distance first. And here are some pics that show distance. So the first type of distance is servers that are located all over the world, which would actually be the internet. And that is a WAN, a wide area network. And that's the first one. Here it comes. Oh. That's the lightning. I'm starting at the top. Anyway, I'll start at the top with the WAN because that's the largest that you have access to. I thought the lightning bolts would start from the top and work their way down, but they start at the bottom. So there goes the lightning bolt thing. But anyway, a WAN at the top is a wide area network. That's the intranet is an example of that. If you lived in a large city, you might have access to a MAN, which would have servers or router points throughout the city or Wi-Fi points throughout the city that you could be connected to in one network, called a metropolitan area network, and that is a MAN. We don't have those around here. You don't, I don't, unless you live in the city. The more common one is a LAN that you might have heard of, local area network, and that's the kind that's in the school. That's also the kind you'd have at home, even though you might call it a home area network. Over on the left side there, you can see it's called a home area network, but they're basically the same thing. One's a little bit larger, obviously, if you have a network at a school compared to a network at home, where you might just have a router or something like that. But they basically work the same way. So home area network and a local area network for small businesses, usually in one kind of building. You could look at it that way. So that's the HAN and LAN. And finally, a personal area network. That could be looked at as something, even, your phone playing music through a speaker, a Bluetooth speaker. But it's usually smaller devices kind of right near each other. But anyway, that's the WAN, MAN, HAN, LAN, and PAN setup. And they're defined by distance. And networks are also defined by level administration. At school, we have to log into the network. To even get on a computer and do anything, you have to log in with your username and password so that you're signed up through the IT department, and that's so you could connect to the servers and use their routers that are in the building. You could also connect to your personal hard drive space, sometimes referred to as your U drive. That's all through a client-server network. You have to be logged in to be able to do that, and it's tightly controlled by the IT department of any kind of school or any kind of building. So there's things you can't do on that network. You can't install any software you want to use. You can't connect to any other computer that you want to. You might be able to see printers, but you might not be able to set up those printers. So those are things on a client-server network. On a peer-to-peer network, we have that situation in the Mac lab where it's a little more loose. It's not set up by the IT department. It's still a network, so you could still connect to other computers, and you could even still connect to the Windows server and connect to printers and things like that, but you just need a username and a password for an individual computer. You don't need a network password and a network username to do that. And that's kind of what you can set up at home as well. You could connect to other computers. You could have a laptop that connects to a desktop. You could print to a printer. All those kind of things you can do at home on a home network, and that's considered a peer-to-peer network. And again, it's not as strict as a client-server network. It's also not as secure as a client-server network. There's the lightning bolts. All right, so that's just the overview. Client-server, peer-to-peer. Client-server is the one that's more restricted. The kind you would have at school. Peer-to-peer, the kind you would have at home or in the Mac lab if you've ever been in there. If you need to connect on a Windows machine, I don't know if this is Windows 10 or Windows 7 I'm looking at right here, the screenshot that I took. But anyway, in your home, if you have a router set up or a network set up, you can connect to other computers. You could connect to whether they're Mac or Windows and things like that. You could use home group. I think they used to call this home group. There it is, set up in home group. On a Mac, if you work on a Mac, you can connect to server, you can connect to Windows servers, you could connect to other Mac computers, usually in the connect to server, and you set that up in file sharing, so you could even set up one computer to act like a server so you could share files with it. But that's where you would do that when you're working on a Mac. And here's what you would see. Here's the local computers that you would see in a Finder that are connected to that. And you could turn them off if you don't want to see them. And usually you still have to have a username and password, some admin username and password for that particular computer, so you can't just barge in on anybody's computer that's on the network. All right, let's change gears a little bit. We'll talk about connecting to the internet, something that you might do. You can do that through cable. I use RCN where I am in the Lehigh Valley. We used to use Service Electric. I know some areas have Comcast. Some people might use DSL, which a lot of times you'll get that from Verizon, or the local phone companies might have DSL service. Fios, I've never used Fios. Some people might have some access to Fios. That's typically the fastest connection that you can get, and that's usually from Verizon. That's fiber optic. And satellite, I haven't heard a lot of good things about satellite, but if you have no other options, you might be able to use satellite or use some kind of dish to be able to connect to the internet. If you've had good success with that, then that's great. And finally, if you have no other options, you may be able to use your cell service. Actually, have your laptop connect by something called tethering and use your cell service. It has to be a faster service to do that, at least 4G to be able to do that. And that may be through Verizon or AT&T or whoever is your cell carrier. And let's just dig into cable just a little bit. That's what I have, and it says 20 to 50 megabits per second. I think we have a plan now that's faster than that. That might go up to 250 megabits per second. They're always getting faster, but at the time I made this PowerPoint, I think it was 20 to 50 as far as your connection speed, and upload is usually a little bit slower, only because more people have a demand for download, and that's more what they try to do is make it download faster. But I upload video, so I usually appreciate faster upload speed as well. And obviously speed can vary during peak times, and there's a lot of people either in your house or in your neighborhood that are on that, so that could slow it down a little bit. If you go on at like 5 o'clock or something like that, things might be a little bit slower. The good thing about cable, if you're already getting cable for your TV, you can get it bundled, phone and things like that, and get a little bit of a better deal since you already have it coming into your home. If you don't have that coming into your home, you probably have a phone line coming into your home, even though you may not use your landline very much anymore. You could get DSL through your phone line, and that can be pretty fast. Not quite as fast as cable, but sometimes it can be a pretty good option for you. Fios, I don't know a lot of people using Fios, but if you're in a city, you might have this option where they have fiber optic lines where they're like little strands of glass that they use, and that could be up to like 500 megabits per second. And again, even cable can do that, but I still think that Fios is probably the fastest option available if you can get it. And satellite's usually not as fast. Satellite can be a little more temperamental in terms of interference and things like that, in terms of weather, storms, and other options. Mobile broadband, that's what I was calling tethering, where you can actually use your cell phone connection. Dial-up, I don't know of anybody using dial-up anymore. I remember using that, years ago. It was painfully slow, 56 kilobits per second. There was no watching videos or anything like that. You'd be lucky to see pictures, and sometimes they would take a while to load. So that was really a painful way to connect, but that's how we all got started. And that's the end of part 1. We'll dig into our home networks a little bit more in part 2.